Welcome to the GM's Corner, a Brewster Baseball Association podcast where we put general managers on the hot seat and try to steal all of their very best secrets. I'm Ron Collins, general manager of the Yellow Springs 9, and today I have Mike Calvaruso with me. Mike is the general manager of the San Antonio Outlaws, which might well be one of the most snake-bit franchises in the league these days. So this should be absolute great fun. Welcome aboard, Mike. I'm really glad to get a chance to share some time with you and looking forward to it.
Thanks, Ron. I appreciate you having me. Based on the way the team is playing, I didn't think anybody in their right mind would want to interview me, but hey, that's good.
Hey, you can have secrets that we can use even when things go wrong.
Well, here's a secret. Whatever I'm doing, do the opposite.
Well, I really can't completely buy that because, I've been in the league for 10 or 11 years, depending on how you cut the information. I look back on San Antonio, and San Antonio, which was Birmingham before you guys moved a little bit ago, has had quite an interesting flow, right, when it comes right down to it. I mean, you've won a Landis.
Yep.
You've been in the playoffs, but unlike some other teams where you see a run of 4, 5, 6 seasons in the playoffs and then a down period, it's like San Antonio is always, the Outlaws are always kind of running along at roughly this 80-win pace, and then about every 4 to 6 years they pop up and they have some great season, and then they go back down into their 80-win thing, and occasionally they'll drop down into 50 or so, until this last 3 years where you've had a really rough time. So what do you think about that?
It's very interesting. Believe me, I've beat my head against the wall quite a few times. You think you have things put together. When I first came into the league, I came into the league in our year 2012. It was the season of 2005 for MBBA or BBA. Took over the team from Weiner, who's now with Rockville, Aaron. And he had actually left me a couple good players because, as a matter of fact, I went to the playoffs the year after. He's the one that drafted Dexter Sheehan, the great catcher. So he left me some good players. But right after 2006, I went ahead and did a sort of a tear down, and because a lot of the players were a little older, so I needed to start refreshing. And that's when I had some very good drafts and trades. Ended up getting Kal-El, Freddie Rigsby. And we ended up going and winning the Landis in 2015. And I look back at that team, and I look at a team that had absolute superior hitting and average pitching. Up and down the lineup, in my opinion, it was a great balance. You had Freddie Rigsby, who could steal any base on the planet leading off. You had Kal-El, you had Dexter Sheehan. You had the great Ashton Fontenot was in your top. And then the bottom of my lineup was Pete McClure, who was just, I think, a rookie or in his second year. You had...
I had not noticed exactly how brilliant Kal-El was until earlier today when I was going deep into the Hall of Fame threads and trying to make an assessment of him. His seasons in his early 20s were... blisteringly brilliant.
Yes, and it did just tail off heavy, it seemed like, because I agree with you. Early on, it looked like he was just, Hall of Fame was just a matter of when he decided to retire. He was just almost unstoppable, and then he did just fall off. But I tried to go back to those teams, and I tried to build a team with some balance, but it just hasn't turned out that way. I actually flipped the script for a while and ended up with very good pitching with Ornelas and Ramirez 1-2, which I'd have to say that's probably one of the best 1-2 in the league for a long, long time. But not much after that. And then the hitters that I got, I went through a series of some poor drafts, obviously, and guys just didn't pan out. And trying to set up for the next year, I would look at guys who had, decent years who bad luck just the next year. I look at a guy like right now is George Bluth. Last year, for 267 with a 321 on-base percentage, 2.4 WAR, I'm looking at him, I'm going, well, as long as he just stays somewhere around that or even just a little lower, he's a very good complimentary player. Well, heck, he's at 207 with a 278 on base percentage. It's just
That's a frustrating thing, and that's actually really interesting. I'd like to get your feeling on this because a lot of times when I talk to people and when I think about building a team, you talked about Ramirez and Ornelas as the big 1-2s. When I was coming into the league, those guys were premium pitchers, right?
Mhm.
I tend to think that a team wins championships with its second tier players.
I would agree.
Because almost everybody, it feels like, has 2 to 4 guys who you could look at and go, those are real super players, right? But it seems to me like when a team is really on a run, they have a good solid chunk of these second tier players that can just step up and carry a team for 3 weeks.
Yep.
Right? They don't have to be the big stars. So how do you think of that in relation to San Antonio and where San Antonio has been, especially in these last, say, 8 to 10 years?
Yeah, and it's the truth because you're right. Every team has the 1 or 2 superstar guys or the 1 or 2 very good guys. But you can have, and like in my case, you can have, an Antonio Tobias hitting 300 with 20 some odd home runs in your 4-hole, and then suddenly you drop down to your 6-hole and you got a guy batting 249, 217, 207. You've got to have some consistency up and down the lineup. You got to have your bottom tier to win the Landis.
Yeah.
You've got to have all the way, up 1 through 9. You've got to have them doing it. Your bottom tier at least average, and you can really do well when they do, like you say, step up.
Yeah. Or I think of some guys who are in that lower tier even, but they're just super elite in one thing, right? And so if you can find a way to block them out and limit their amount, Stever is fantastic at this, right? I mean, Kyle finds guys, especially his left-handed system.
Yes.
If he can find a super duper left-handed pinch hitter and get him 100 at-bats, as long as he doesn't get 150 at-bats, he's really useful, right? So it's really... talk to me about your injuries, right? Because Buckland, Wick are just kind of the latest. Ramirez was maybe the harbinger. I don't know. Is that from the outside looking in? It feels like you have just been completely eroded. Does that feel that way, or is there more to it than that?
No, that would probably be a good assessment. When Wick came around, he was supposed to be the next chain of events after Ramirez or Nellis decided to start to, degrade, which they eventually did. But his career, he was ace material, and his career so far has been decimated just about with the injuries. He just can't seem to stay healthy. Buckland has no business being a number 1, and he's had to pitch in the number 1 spot for like the last 2.5 years, for the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. He has no business being in the number 1 spot. He's at best a 2, probably more like a 3, really. So he's pitched out of position, and I've just had to fill in as it goes on. I've a couple trades down the line that I may have traded a pitcher that could have helped me. Traded a pitcher with Aaron in Rockville for Frank Thomas III a couple of years back. At the time, I thought I was at 1 or 2 guys away because Ornelas, Ramirez, they were really there in their prime, killing it. And I thought I could use that thumper. And what happens? Thomas has the worst year almost of his career. Goes from I think it was a 4.3 WAR to a 1.1. Lost 60 points on his batting average.
And that wasn't an injury, right? That was just a straight out a random occurrence of performance.
And I scratched my head on that for a long time. I don't understand why. I don't know what made that happen. I don't know if there was chemistry with the coach. I don't know if he didn't like the ballpark. If my ballpark, settings, I just don't know. It boggled my mind that he dropped that bad. I mean, he was a great player, and then he for me, he just kind of fell off. I just don't understand.
And that's the beginning of his age decline too. But you don't expect him to drop like that.
Exactly.
So when you did that, I thought, well, that's a pretty good calculated gamble, and But the key word is gamble in almost everything that we do, right? Before it's all said and done.
Yeah, you're right.
If there's ever a guarantee of anything, then the game wouldn't be any fun as far as that goes. Except on occasion, you'd like it to be a little more guaranteed than that.
Yeah, it would have been nicer. But yeah, injuries have just not been my friend. And I went through that back in the early 2011, 2012, 2013, when I had great hitters. And some of the other guys, Aaron especially, would tell you that we went through a series to where the team just had little nitpicky injuries here and there that would just keep us out of the playoffs. Or 2015 was the first year that I really don't think I had any major injury, and the team just blew through the regular season, got into the postseason, and hammered it. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the guys at the end, and I think it might have been Aaron, as a matter of fact, made the comment, we always wondered what would happen if Birmingham would stay healthy, and now we see.
That was the Landis year, right?
That was Landis year.
You are one of my heroes since you can say I've won a Landis, and me and my poor little Yellow Springs 9 are always a bridesmaid.
I look at you guys and I'm like, God, you it's just weird because you have what I would assume, or what it looks to me, is all the elements you need, but luck plays a much bigger role than we want to admit.
I have all the elements except the hardware, Mike. I have no hardware.
It's coming, baby.
Or as Fred says, flags fly forever, and I got no flags.
That's hurtful. That's hurtful.
Well, now you've been in the league since 2005 BBA time, right? Mm. You're one of the collection of people who have been around for a considerable amount of time. I'd be very interested in your perspective of the league and how it's evolved from that time period. We've gone through now 2 different expansions, different division structures. How do you feel about the overall context of what the league is right now and where it's been?
I don't know if I could be any more excited about the league we're in. When I first joined BBA, when I first got into OOTP, I jumped around to a couple of the leagues. I'm a baseball geek from birth. I even played down here in Baton Rouge in Louisiana. They had an adult baseball league that I played up until I was like 10 years ago, until an inadvertent slide into third base decided that I didn't need to play baseball anymore. But playing in OOTP, playing in BBA has been just a fantastic joy for me. For someone who truly, passionately loves baseball, to be in an environment with other guys who seem to passionately love baseball, and guys who can break it down on many different levels. The league has grown, and it's grown, in my opinion, the way it should have. It hasn't been forced to grow. It's grown in a natural state. There was always going to be a point in time, I thought, where expansion was going to have to happen. With that, there was going to have to be realignment. I think Matt has done an admirable job at running this league, even with all us goofuses that he has to deal with on a daily basis.
I can't imagine why anyone would think that there's ever any conflict in this league.
Exactly. You make one bad trade and good Lord. Huh.
I was actually interested when I first came into the league, right? The EBA was there, and it was being used as both a fun wing of the fictional aspect of the world, right? And it was also a way to bring GMs, lowly GMs like me in, and act as kind of the bullpen. When did that come in, and how did you feel about that?
Matt had tried to do that a couple different seasons, and could never get enough GMs to come in at the right time. There was always 1 or 2 guys that wanted to go in and take the EBA teams, but you had 2 human GMs against the rest of the automated GMs, and it just didn't seem to work out. It just seemed to be conjointed. It just didn't seem to have flow. And you finally got the year when you and a few of the other. I think we had 6 human GMs. Mm-hmm. At that year, and that's when it took off, and it made sense to be, I guess, the stepping stone to move in to BBA. See if guys that really wanted to take it and go with it, if they really enjoyed being in this league. And
Yeah, I don't know whether it was actually done this way on purpose, but it feels like the EBA was a great escort into the expansion process, right? Because we actually had some GMs who were ready to roll, and the players that we could build from without having to completely strip down the existing teams. And so in that way, we almost had a perfect 4-team expansion, it felt like to me. And then when we did the 2-team expansion with the swaps of having established GMs take over the new teams and newer GMs come into the old teams, I don't know whether that's like Matt having this great master plan or whether he's just the greatest opportunist in the entire world or what, but it really worked well in my mind.
I'd probably say a little of both. If I had to guess, I'd probably say he had that in his brain or in his head the whole time, and then it just fell into place at the right moment, and he jumped on it when it finally did, because it did show, the eBay did show that expansion was time, it was necessary, and that it would work. Mm-hmm. So it just turned out great.
Now, you mentioned just a little bit ago that you played ball and from Louisiana. Are you born and bred, raised from Louisiana? Is this your native hometown, or has it just become your home over time?
No, I'm born and bred down in Baton Rouge. Grew up in Baton Rouge. I live just outside of Baton Rouge now, but I've lived here all my life.
And I think in our earlier conversation, PMs, you talked about that your non-BBA persona is industrial management, industrial.
I'm an industrial sales engineer. In Louisiana, we have a tremendous amount of chemical plants, refineries, and so on. And I'm a technical sales. I'm a district sales manager for the state of Louisiana. So I travel a good bit and cover all the chemical plants, refineries, which with the rise of oil prices over the last year has gotten quite busy for me.
One of the things I love about these GM's Corners is I get to actually meet and talk with the people who are actually playing in the league, and it makes me feel better because it makes me feel like I'm not just this unique weirdo, right? Everyone is got the same kind of sets of problems. How does this fit into your life? How does your family look at this? They know you're a baseball geek, I would assume, they bought into that from a long time ago. How does this fit into your life?
I'm very lucky. My wife, bless her, luckily she was in the coma when I married her. She knows I love baseball, and she loves baseball too, so she doesn't give me any problems whatsoever. We're both our kids are grown and gone, and we have 2 grandkids. So in the evening, whenever I get back home and I've gone through my reports and checked up on my quotes and things like that, I can take my hour in my little office or sitting on the recliner in the TV, mm-hmm. and play on OOTP and play on BBA and catch up on how my players are doing and try to structure that. So I do take a couple hours almost every night to look at my team.
If you're like me, that hour that you spend or whatever, because I'm different, right? I do 10 minutes here and 15 minutes here and 30 minutes here and 2 minutes here throughout the day because I work at home and I use it as a divergence. Whenever I'm in the middle of writing, because I'm a science fiction writer, right? Whenever I'm in the middle of someplace and I get blocked, I just say, well, screw it, I can't figure that out. So I go do something else and I come back and my brain has figured out what the answer is, right? But anyway, it's kind of a refuge from
absolutely
everything else, right, before it's all said and done. So
exactly. It helps you decompress and relax.
Favorite moment outside of winning a Landis as the Birmingham/San Antonio general manager?
Ooh.
I ask that question to everyone, and they come back with, "Oh, it's when I won the Landis." And I go, "Well, screw you! I haven't won a Landis, so I want to hear something that's not winning a Landis."
Favorite moment.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I could truly. I guess now I could look back and say my favorite moment was actually having the instant message come back from Matt saying that I'd been awarded the franchise.
I like that.
I was excited because I had kind of looked at the league and kind of was playing around and looking at everybody's their interaction. And when he finally sent me the email and let me know, okay, you're the new Birmingham GM, I was just tickled to death. I even went and told my wife, I'm the new Birmingham GM. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you'll understand later.
I actually completely and 100% understand, because I was asking myself that question one day, right? I've asked this question to almost everybody that I talk with, right? Favorite moment. And I sat there and thought, what would my favorite moment be? And I'm thinking, I think my favorite moment was when I actually signed up for the league and made my little announcement. And I mean, just the idea was really cool. Already you've dropped throughout the history of the Birmingham San Antonio franchise several names. I
Mhm.
want you to narrow it down to one name, your absolute favorite outlaw player of all time.
Dexter Sheehan,
Why?
because not only was he probably the best player I've actually had been able to GM, he just he embodied the team. He was the captain. You could always count on him year in, year out. Great work, high work ethic, high intelligent, high leadership guy. Without him, the team didn't run. We had Kal-El, we had Rigsby, we had Fontenot, who were good players, but Sheehan was the cog in the entire wheel.
Um, Talk to me a little bit about what your future plans are with San Antonio, right? You've run into a little bit of a drop off from 3 years ago. I want to say you were up around the 95, 97
Yes.
win. I mean, you looked solid. You had some injuries we've already talked about. You had a precipitous drop down into the 60s and 70s. That's a big drop.
Yes, it is.
What's the master plan look like for San Antonio going forward?
Yeah, it's definitely time for a major rebuild. I guess you could say I've been fortunate enough to go ahead and stack the minors with some solid and very solid players. A couple guys that look like they have superstar or star talent written on them. But after this year, I can tell you there's going to be a lot of non-renewed contracts for older guys. It's time to go ahead and maybe bite the bullet for another year. Because, like you say, I have been kind of hovering around the 80 win mark. I've been going along with the approach. If I can just make it into the playoffs, who knows what will happen.
So that's been the fundamental kind of idea for a while, is to try to hang in and just pick your spots. Is that?
Pick your spots. Hope that some of the guys come back from last year and do as well as they did, or hope some of the guys that had rough years pick it up.
Mhm.
I tend to be a lot of black and white. For a long time, I looked at star ratings and thought, just because he was a 3-star guy, he should be, very average. When it doesn't always work out that way. You look at a guy, say, with a 5 contact. Well, if we look at 10 being a star, star, 5 should be at least average. It doesn't always work out that way. So there's been a lot of learning and head scratching along the way, and it just, hasn't always worked out. So it's time to reevaluate some of the things that I've been doing. I guess go ahead and kind of break it down a little again and try to build it back up into a little bit more solid foundation. So
I think the San Antonio fans will like that approach.
the days of trying to squeeze another year out of this guy or piecemeal, it's just not going to work now, especially with the guys like Ornelas and Ramirez gone. You don't have. I don't look at my team now as having the good, solid foundation of 3, 4, 5 solid players up and down that you can count on. I don't see that now, so it's just not going to work.
I think at some point, you have to step back and kind of go, it is time to go do things over again. Even in my personal philosophy, right? That's I keep talking to people and saying, my goal is I'm going to win 95 games every year.
Well,
That's the goal, right? And I'm going to make all my plans that way. But at a certain point, when things go wrong, if you don't actually decide, things are going wrong here, then you don't have anything to fall back on. Let me turn this around a little bit. It's
Sure.
kind of traditional. If you'd like me to talk about anything, if you've got any questions for me, I'll be happy to field them and at least pretend like I have something of interest to say.
Okay, number one, what can I do different?
Well, now that's a conversation we can have afterwards. The best thing you can do is trade me Carpenter.
Oh, that guy?
That would be a fantastic deal for you. And I can give you a couple of guys, like I will give you 15 half-star guys, and those add up to 7.5 stars. You can't go wrong.
Why would you do something so? See, look, I was just going to cut Carpenter after this year, but if you do that, I mean, that makes all the sense.
I'm a charitable guy, Mike. You can just ask anyone in the league who has viewed my trade practices, and they will all tell you that I'm highly charitable.
I obviously got to stop drinking so heavy during the weekday. I guess that's really about it. Appreciate you having me on.
There you go. I appreciate you being here. It's been fantastic to talk with you.
Thank you, buddy.
The Brewster Baseball Association is an out-of-the-park baseball league commissioned by Mr. America himself, Matt Rechtenwald, and competed in by 30 outstanding general managers. Check us out at montybrewster.net. You have been listening to the GM's Corner, a podcast where we put BBA GMs on the hot seat. Music is Cool Piano by Tigerius and is used under Creative Commons Attribution License. See you next time. Be safe, and always remember, even a boring team news is worth 2 points.